Well, hi, we're now back in the workshops at Analogue Automotive, and I'm with Steffen Dobke again. Steffen, at this phase, we've started the breakdown of the car. How far do you actually go with the strip down?
We go as far as we physically can. So the chassis obviously has bonded side sills, crash structure, screen surround. So there's quite a few bonded components that come from the factory. I try to avoid taking those off if there's no damage to them. If there is some damage, then we maybe have to remove those. But that goes back to buying a decent donor car. So ideally, we'd strip it down to the chassis, screen surround, crash structure, and side sills. And that's basically everything we would use going forward.
And I suppose I'm not alone in wondering how much actually goes back onto the car as you build it back up, or is it all just scrap or what?
No, so we recycle, for want of a better word, the original body panel. So the original camshells, original doors, some of which are sort of, you can get clamshells aftermarket, but they don't usually fit as well. So again, we buy a good, decent car as a donor car, we can reuse those. We do some amendments to the front clam, additional carbon pieces in there. We do some amendments to the door structure itself. So we do sort of slightly refresh some of those, and obviously they get painted and look like brand new again. But yeah, screen surround, new screen in it, the original door glass, if that's in good condition, and the rear subframe, which we then take apart and do some, again, modifications to powder coat and refit. So there's the good structure of the chassis and body is all used. It's more of the ancillary parts that get completely. So as you say, some of them does get into the wishbones, for example. Best will in the world, if they're in good condition, we'll recycle those for another project or a restoration project, but they're 25, 30 years old, so they've done their life cycle in our view. So all fresh wishbones and all the metal parts. There's a few little brackets we reuse, but majority of it, that's the core part we use.
I would imagine it's quite rare that you actually start one of these projects and for nothing to change between commissioning and handover. I would imagine quite a lot of people get quite enthusiastic about doing extra bits as they go along. That could lengthen the process, I suppose.
Yeah. So the process I've tried to sort of come up with, it tries to negate any horrible findings. So for instance, if we're restoring I don't know, for want of a better word, an Alpha or something like that, that's a 70s, 80s steel car, there's a lot of unknowns there that even the people who buy them and are experts on them don't know until you get into it. With these cars, it is a little easier. The chassis are pretty hardy. So I know from a visual inspection, getting on a ramp, maybe even when we're purchasing, sort of lying on the ground and having a look, getting your head under the pedal box, things like that. So we don't get caught out in that way, but then going forward through the build process, one of the best things I've found about the process is that people do get enthusiastic. They're not sitting there waiting for us to phone up and say, oh, we found this. It's more a case of, would you like to do this? And then their mind gets to work, and that's a nice bit. So for instance, we now do a lot more carbon work than I initially intended to do. People have asked about full carbon body work, which is something we can do. The price is eye-watering.
I can imagine that,
I now have come up with, there's a few bits I didn't personally like, particularly around the light buckets, which I think you might show later. A few bits that we weight save on, a few slightly, for want of a better word, tarty pieces that I like to put on there to make it look nice, but we use carbon a lot more than we intended to or started out to. Costs obviously increased because of that, but yeah, the process does, and that's been led by customers saying, oh, can we do this, can we do that? And the answer is always yes. It's just sometimes it takes a little longer, so a couple of jobs have taken a little longer.
Well, I guess it's evolving as well, because in the time that we've been talking, I've known that you have come up with some new parts, some new techniques and so on, which can be offered to customers as options as well, which maybe weren't there 9 months ago.
Exactly, yeah. So when we started the project we're going to look at later, there was at least, off the top of my head, 3 or 4 items on that we hadn't considered doing or hadn't facilitated doing, and now we have. I'm quite fortunate around here that we've got some very good people within the southeast and even within the UK that can sort of produce carbon fibre parts, bespoke parts, and there's some engineering parts that we have sort of machined and fabricated and made as well. So that's been quite exciting, doing all that sort of stuff. Yeah,
well, you really do take these cars down to the bare bones. Is it really necessary to go that far?
I think so. I mean, if we, as well as the Supersport builds, we do a lot of restoration. So we've got 6 Supersports in build, and I think we've got another 2 or 3 Elise and an Exige in for restoration. They don't go as far down because there's no need to. So for instance, one of the changes we were just discussing, loom-wise, on a restoration car, we'd probably leave the standard loom in there. Again, it's 25, 30 years old, but the customer knows that. As long as there's nothing broke on that, they seem to work quite well. On the Supersport build, because of the level we're going for, that is all taken out, and we have a bespoke motorsport loom to go in there, which is more expensive, but means we can put a up-to-date ECU on it. We have an up-to-date PCM, so it gets rid of all the horrible fuses and relays of a 30-year-old technology, so it really does update it. Digital dash, which again I didn't used to have when we first started, but now we do. So there's lots of things that have evolved and we can do, but that does mean stripping it back down to, as that car is there, and the sort of the 2 inner, maybe out of shot, down to its bare bones, and that is as they would have come out of Lotus as a chassis, and that's where Lotus would have started their build of an Elise.
And what's likely to be revealed when you do go into one of these to the bones strip downs?
So again, going right back, we would have probably gauged how good or bad it would have been by initial inspection. There are a couple of key areas of corrosion, so that's on any Elise. Even in the showroom we've got like a 3,000 miler that's immaculate, and I can still see a few bits that if we don't just attend to, that will happen just from being 30 years old. So one of the major ones is I find on the back of the firewall there's a heat shielding and a soundproofing that's essentially foam. Gets moisture in it, sits against aluminium, starts to eat into it. So that's, when we take the engine out, when we take that firewall material off, we'll expose, it's just how bad it is. Sometimes it's a few little marks that we can clean up. Other times we need to do a little bit more in-depth repair to it. Again, pedal box is another one. In a restoration, we won't necessarily take a pedal box out. In a Supersport build, yes, the pedal box comes out. We do some reinforcement to that area where the pedal box sits to stop the Elise having a slightly weird wobbly pedal box that I can do with thin aluminium. So it does need to go back that far to do what we're going to do with it. On the other side, if you were doing a restoration, you probably didn't need to go that far, but it will cost less because of that.
I guess you can only do some of the treatments that you're going to do if the car is stripped back as well, I imagine.
Exactly. Those rear firewall treatments you can only do with the engine out, so at a very minimum. And when we do a restoration, I always say to customers, sometimes depending on how deep they want to go with the restoration, the engine really needs to come out. Simple things. I'm doing servicing now, and we have what I call a 10+ year service, which on these cars is probably 20+ year. Some cars haven't had the clams off, so we'll just, from a service point of view, take the clam off, and you will be able to see all sorts of little horrible things. Even if it's just in case of there's a lot of dirt in there, we need to get in there and clean it all up and jet wash it and sort of do some maintenance from a cleanliness point of view. But that will get rid of all the build-up of dirt and dust and grime over the years. So from a bare minimum, just a servicing needs a bit more to be in more depth. These are classic cars now, they're not.
They absolutely are, It's hard to think of them as that, but they really are, aren't they? Okay, well, that's kind of the strip down process. I think next we're going to talk about the commissioning stage where a customer starts to decide, what colour he's going to have, interior, etc. So let's move on to that, shall we?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right, we're now at the stage which must be quite exciting for Supersport customers, I would imagine, Steffen. That's when they start to get to choose some of the options for their car, the colours, the trim, etc. How far can they go? Let's start with colours of the car.
It's paint to sample, so whatever they can dream up. I don't have any fixed colour, like you would do with it's a bespoke product. So, if we go to, let's use Porsche as an example, they have some standard colours, and anything above that will incur a premium. I basically budget for the customer picking whatever colour they want.
Do you find that in discussions so far, people are sticking mostly with traditional Lotus colours, or are they thinking outside the box at all?
Mostly outside the box, yeah. So,
really?
The interesting thing of, say, for example, the sort of 4 or 5 we've got at the moment here, we've got a couple at body shop already as well. They tend to tone with the original car. So, for instance, on that client's car that we're following, it was a silver titanium colour, and he's stayed with the sort of a grey hue. A Porsche colour, but I think it's, when you see it, we do a speed shape colour sample as well as some blowout cards. We start that process actually, although it's, this car is obviously back from the body shop.
Yep.
So it's gone through the stage of strip down, it's gone through a stage of cleaning repairs, then gets dollied off as a bare chassis for the side sills, and all the bodywork's previously gone over to them for any work. So we're on the other side of that, but the choice process starts a lot earlier. So I now start that conversation pretty much at the point of deposit and having the car sort of commissioned.
Yep.
Just to get people's, I don't need that decision there, but to get people's juices flowing and creativity going, because it soon catches up with you. So between when we start a build and it's probably ready for paint is 4 or 5 months. Mm-hmm. So it's only sort of the midway point that this car's at and that's been painted, but I've had some last minute changes and stuff, which is we can do, but it's not like we have to set it in stone, but we need to know at a certain point or something like that. But we have been asked to put graphics down the side. There are certain extras that we can do. The carbon comes into the paintwork side of things because that needs to be done prior to the paintwork. It's an exciting part of the process, but we do have to start it earlier than maybe I even imagined.
I can imagine it. And if a customer decided to get really wild and wacky, wanted something extreme, is it complete freedom of choice, or would you try to guide them a little bit?
It's their car, their commission.
I suppose they're paying the money, aren't they?
I suppose. I say, I don't want things that's shag-pile carpet and leopard print paintwork, if that's a thing, but if that's what the customer wants. We try to do things tastefully, if that's what you're saying, but most of the clients are, when they're commissioning, anyone who's commissioning a car to be built to, they usually has good taste. They'll have other cars that they've had in the past that they either want to revisit, or they'll be inspired by sometimes in race cars or certain colour schemes. There are some traditional ones, so the greens are always quite popular. So we've done a couple, and we keep, whenever I do a sort of speed shape spray out car, we keep those. We've got a nice wall that we're building up of all the different colours, so it makes it easier as time goes on.
Okay, well, your mention of shag-pile carpets moves us into the interior of the car. What sort of options can we spec there?
Again, there's quite a few. I try to lean away from too heavily carpeted because the exposed aluminium chassis to me has always been a core piece of the Elise. So we retain the original dash. There's a lot of carbon options we can do there. So we have a company that makes those for us. We also rejuvenate, I should say, the aluminium. We go through a cleaning process that gets it as close to as new. I mean, there may well be some, when we highlight this to customers, some really fine scratches, but they will have seen the car in its purchased new state when we've just got it. So some things we can't, it's an anodized aluminium chassis, so there's some parts we just will get very, very nice, but best will in the world, we can't re-anodize the car once it's done. We add some sound deadening because we're saving weight, which I think we've discussed in previous videos. So we add some sound deadening, that makes the car feel a lot more solid. We do this all at a lower level. That enables us to, or requires us then to trim over the top of it. So for example, as a standard, you'll get a sound deadened base and inside the fuel tank, and then we'll trim that in an Alcantara, but whether that's black, grey, sort of browns are quite popular as well. That's all options. And then interior carbon. The original grey dash pieces are refurbished with a process that's pretty much identical to the original one. And then seats, it's a major part of an Elise.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. I'm sure people have some strong opinions on seats.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. Some people like the original leather seat, so we would retrim that. We'd use the original bases. They could go up to a sport bucket seat. Again, we go to the manufacturers who make those, and they could be, again, either in a sort of a technical cloth or race trim cloth, or we can then Alcantara or leather to whatever colour you want. Or then, as one of our options, the higher option is a full carbon pack, which is a pair of Tillet carbon seats. And then again, they have very comfortable. They don't look it, but they are really. I've done sort of 300-400 miles around Wales in a day in them, and I get a bad back in normal seats, and I don't in those. So they're very good seat. And then they have a cushion set as well, which is sort of a thin Alcantara material. And again, that can be in whatever colour you chose, really.
Yeah, I guess there are size options for seats as well.
Yeah, so
people are all sorts of different shapes and sizes.
Yeah, no, so I've been tended to go for a standard. It comes with a wider seat.
Yeah.
It fits me better, and I'm a slimmer chap. If someone wanted a very svelte seat, then option that down to a thinner seat. The passenger seat's always thinner, so you can have that option of a wider seat, which we do as I've decided to do as standard, and then if someone wants a slimmer seat, we can do that. But there's two widths essentially on the driver's seat.
And staying in the cockpit, what about what I'll loosely call tech? You know, if people have a really fancy stereo if somebody wants that? I mean, nearly every car these days has screens in cars.
Yep.
Android Auto, Apple CarPlay. How much of that can you embrace?
I ban it.
Can't say I blame you.
Yeah, no. These are driverless cars, therefore going out and driving. As I said earlier, I've done long trips. We've done some road tests and done testing in deepest, darkest Wales because I've got some great roads. The sound deadening makes it a nice place to be.
Yep.
We've updated the heating system, so it's warm. We can have heated seats if you want. It's a thin pad that heats that. I think the essence of these cars is the driving experience. So I like to keep it very simple. We've updated the dash with a digital dash option.
Yep.
We've updated the switch gear, so that's more reliable. We've updated although it's still very simple, the heating system, but it works. And the enjoyment is listening to the throttle bodies behind you and the exhaust note and driving the car.
Yeah, I'm with you there. Yeah. Absolutely. Okay, step outside the cockpits. A lot of people are going to want to talk about suspension, I would imagine.
So we have two as a standard. There'll be all new wishbones, but it'll be the standard width, standard setup the car came with. Obviously, we've uprated bushes. We've got some options on the dampers. But the two options on the actual track are the standard track or what we call our wide track, which is our own bespoke wishbones that are slightly wider.
Yep.
Fills the arches out a little bit. Aesthetically, it looks better, and the front end grip is greatly increased. Rear is obviously track is wider as well, so overall it's a wider track. But if you want a more classic Elise experience, so you don't want to maybe use it on track, you want to have it to feel the nice light steering that an Elise is known for.
Yep.
The standard track would be the way to go on that. It does make the wider track makes the steering a little heavier, but it is designed for that.
For the look of the car, the wide track seems to have quite a lot of effect. It actually almost looks like you've got a wide body.
Yeah.
Wider body.
Yeah, I think there's a combination. The demo car that's had the press and people have seen a lot of, I wanted to make that look a bit more aggressive. So it's all stealthed out, so it's black wheels.
Yep.
But the paintwork on that is done to a higher level than standard Elise would be. So it does, the Elise has got nice wheel arch, sort of flared wheel arch shapes. And I think when you paint a car to a higher level, that accentuates it, and the track then accentuates that even more. So yeah, a lot of people think the body's been widened, but it's just the track of the car.
No, that car looks proper mean.
Yeah. And then going on to dampers, there's obviously within each of those, wide track or standard track, there's options on dampers. The wide track is designed as a package, so we've had sort of our own sort of a damper, which is a Nitron Club Sport damper base. So that all works together as a nice package, but you could go softer. These are all discussions we have with the customer.
Yeah, I would imagine that after all the years of looking after these cars, you've probably got a number of sort of ideal combinations that you could perhaps recommend. But I guess, again, it's a situation where if a customer has a particular favourite damper or something like that, you could probably embrace that.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, we can do whatever they want. The demo car is there for just that, so that's a good starting point. That is obviously higher spec, if you like, so it's got all the carbon parts on it. Yep. It's got the wide track, it's got the bigger engine, so they're all the boxes ticked. If someone wanted to downgrade, we have a couple going out to America, and they've got some legislation issues with emissions, so they're having 160-ish horsepower engines fitted. Yep. One customer's a lot more traditional, so it's not having any carbon, it's not having the wide track. Again, it's all down to how that person's, we're not saying this is the car and that's it, and you're locked in Model T Ford style. We only do one as long as it's black. Sure.
And staying inside the wheel arches, what about brakes?
Brakes are uprated to a certain extent. We're not, again, going for any big fancy brakes. I wanted to retain the original wheel size. So the original 15, 16-inch wheels. I have tested other wheel combinations and I just didn't sort of pass my test, if you like. Right. But within that wheel confine, you can't go massive. You can get 4 pots, but to be honest, we've saved quite a lot of weight from the car, so it doesn't actually need. It brakes well. We uprate them, so they're aluminium belled discs, uprated pads, and again, it goes to usage. So if someone's not going to use it on a racetrack, or not going to do track days, which amazingly some customers don't, then we don't need to go as far. But it'll standard, it'll come with alley-belled
Right.
discs front and back, and then we have a few packages that could uprate that. All the brake lines are braided, so that it's a much better performing braking car than it is out of the box. But there's no need to go completely mad with it, because it just doesn't need it.
No, absolutely not. The joys of a light car, eh?
Yeah, and also, you know, we retain they haven't got any ABS. There's no traction control, so it's a very nice pedal feel we've managed to get, and the Elise does naturally have a good pedal feel.
So I know some people are a little confused about this. Where are you aiming the Supersport? Is it supposed to be a track day car, or is it supposed to be a road car? Best of both worlds, or what's your thinking here?
If we went back to sort of inspiration, I've had a lot of, I still do, Sport 160s, Sport 190, Exiges. You know, that was the inspiration for the Supersport.
Yeah.
Funnily enough, now if I back to back, say a 190 or an Exige with a Supersport, you know, it outperforms it in every way. It's not designed as an out-and-out track car. Otherwise, you know, we wouldn't paint it and make it look as nice as we do. It's not a race car, so it is very much meant for, I would probably say, the roads around us is, you know, we're based in Fernhurst, stone's throw away from Goodwood and the South Downs. There's some great roads around here. You know, it's not very far, a few hours we can be in Wales. So it is a fast road car.
I guess if you were going to make it into an out-and-out track car, you'd do some things differently anyway, wouldn't you?
Exactly, yeah.
Absolutely.
And you can, you know, there are people who we do, you know, we can, if you wanted a full race car or something that's maybe edging towards that, there's certainly things you can do on there. I think most, well, we've been led by our clients, most are quite happy with its level and its area where we've sort of marketed and tagged it as, which is, I say, a fast road car. We go on track, we test it at Goodwood all the time. The engines, you know, that car could probably drive itself around Goodwood, it's been around there enough. It stands up with the abuse, so, you know, I'm testing that engine in the, or have done, to pretty much destruction, which Touch Plastic hasn't done yet, but you know, if that does, you know, tells us a lot. But you know, they're very strong engines. We've used the best materials. It's basically a detuned race engine. Yeah, and if someone wants something that's a bit more track focused, we can do that. I'd like to think, you know, it will be fast roads, a nice place to be. It's comfortable. It's not too crashy. I've done a lot of work on the damping to make it. You know, our roads aren't great. And then if you do want to go on the track, you might lose 0.1% against a slightly more track-based car. But gentlemen, yeah, you can drive down to Goodwood, do your track day, drive back.
Yeah. Well, I've spent plenty of time in S1 Elises, and I know that they are utterly marvellous on the road, but also even a bog standard car doesn't disgrace itself on track. So the changes that you make are going to make this into a really special car.
Yeah, they've always punched above their weight.
Yeah.
You know, if you look at the stats, it doesn't really tell you anything. But you know, if you're up against a GT3 on a big, long, fast track, yeah, you might struggle, but then
get to the twisty bit.
Yeah, exactly, and then you can you can chase them down.
Okay, well, we're about wrapping up from now. In our next chat, we'll be talking about the actual build-up of the car. So that's something I'm really looking forward to. Thanks today, Steffen, and we'll see you again soon.
Pleasure.